Ready? A very good evening. You're watching India Today social media. I'm Nabila Jamal. Let me start with the whole language war that India Today has been, covering all sides of. In fact, we saw how India Today's interview with Kichcha Sudeep, Indian superstar, because I dare not say South superstar. There is no South and North today with the media platforms so wide. The lines have blurred, language lines have blurred. People, movies are being dubbed across languages, and then you have South stars doing really well and really popular even in the North. In the North, of course, the ones from the North have usually been quite popular in the South as well. So we're looking at stars who are stars now pan-India. So two Indian cinema stalwarts. One is Kichcha Sudeep, who belongs to predominantly works with the southern film industry, and then you have Ajay Devgn, predominantly with Bollywood. Both of them clashing on which language should be the national language. So it's very interesting to see how Ajay Devgn has, in fact, it was Kichcha Sudeep who first said, because South cinema is doing so well, be it RRR, be it Pushpa The Rise, be it KGF 2, and it's raking up a lot more revenue than any Bollywood film in the past. He says that, now looking at the success of South Indian films across the world, now Hindi is no more the national language. Obviously, this did not go down too well with the Hindi star, with Ajay Devgn. He says, bro, with all due respect, Hindi is and will always be our mother tongue and our national language. And if you did not regard Hindi as a national language, then why do you dub your films in Hindi? So this obviously sparked another round of debate between Kichcha Sudeep and him, because Sudeep jumped in, and knowing Sudeep, he is very shrewd. He is savage, in fact, if he has to be. So he got back at Sudeep, at Ajay Devgn. Sudeep got back at Ajay saying that, first of all, Ajay's tweet was written in Hindi. So Sudeep said, with all due respect, I think this is misunderstanding what you may have heard, but just anyway saying that if I had written this message, this tweet in Kannada, would you have understood it? Because he says that he understands Hindi, reads Hindi, can read, write, and understand what he's written, the tweet that he put out in Hindi, because he respects Hindi language, and he expects the same thing on the other end. He expects Ajay also to respect the Kannada language equally. So this was a very tense verbal duel between the two of them on Twitter, where Ajay Devgn, of course, insisted that Hindi should be the national language, and Kichcha Sudeep said that's, of course, out of the question. It's not a national language whatsoever. So now, a little in the backdrop of to this conversation and the debate on language and which should be crowned as the national language of the country, can Hindi really be given that position as the national unifying language for India, which is so culturally diverse, linguistically diverse? Well, the fact is that it's very, very hard to put a figure on this, and I think the larger fact is that it's impossible to really crown one certain language to say this is the language that needs to be crowned as a national language, because India has South India. Of course, you have states of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Kerala having all different languages, and none of these states have barely a minuscule population speaking Hindi, and the Hindi speaking population are mostly people who've come settled down in the south. The ones from the north settled down in the south. Now, on the contrary, even for that matter, northeast, your states like Assam, your Manipur, Nagaland, and several other northeastern states have absolutely no connect with Hindi. In fact, they too have resisted Hindi in many ways for a while. Bengal, for that matter, Gujarat, for that matter, none of these states speak Hindi. Maharashtra has started to open up and warm up to Hindi for that matter, but otherwise Maharashtra was also predominantly Marathi, is still predominantly Marathi, but Hindi still is largely used. But for the southern states and for the northeastern states, Hindi is an absolute disconnect. It's either the local language or it's English. So English is more of a unifying language, as is what they see. But even what the politicians say, on the other hand, could be looked at very well, considering that English is a foreign language. At the end of it, it isn't a local language to India. Should we accept a foreign language as our national language, as an official national language? That's the question being asked, while South Indian states and even the northeastern states says, why not? What's wrong in a national, what's wrong in English, even if it's international, to be a unifying language for India, because that is more commonly spoken between northeastern states, southern states, and even for that matter across the India, even the Hindi belt. English is almost a common factor across all. Hindi is not a common factor across all. That's what the argument is. So you have actors across film industries. I spoke to one from the Telugu film industry, Lakshmi Manchu. She says, I want Telugu to be the national language. Kichcha Sudeep says, why not Kannada be the national language? A.R. Rahman said, why should not Tamil be the national language? That's the oldest language. And of course, Bollywood, you have champions batting for Hindi to be the national language. So this is very hard to really say which language can be crowned as a national language. Now there are several southern states like Karnataka who's always fought against and resisted Hindi imposition. Tamil Nadu, in fact, really has really been the center focus and the hotbed of Hindi imposition debate and a backlash that the Tamilians have given to Hindi imposition for time and again. The protests have been so severe against Hindi imposition that at times protests turn violent, where people immolate themselves, they set themselves on fire only in protest against this Hindi imposition. Prime Minister after Prime Minister, post-independence, in fact this debate has been going on pre-independence too, but even post-independence, different Prime Ministers have tried to convince states across India to have one unifying language to be locally used as Hindi. But states did not approve of it, like Tamil Nadu never approved, Karnataka never approved, many states like Assam had a huge protest against Hindi imposition. So there has been resistance that's been met with time and again, and no Prime Minister so far has been able to impose Hindi, or even for that matter any other language, as one unifying language, except for English, which is already established. So which is why this debate just rages on and becomes very difficult. Now, now people would say, what is the problem with Hindi, right? There is no problem with Hindi. It is not about anyone. There's no hatred towards the Hindi language whatsoever. This is the sense that I've obviously got from South Indians, and I'm South Indian myself, so I can speak for them at large, that there is certainly no hatred for Hindi as a language, but there is resistance to allow Hindi or to declare Hindi as one unifying official language of the country. Why should only Hindi have that benefit? Hindi is only spoken in 12 states across India, when there are 26 official languages and 100 other dialects in India. Why should one language, which is spoken only in 12 states, be made the official language? You have official documents then that will be shared in Hindi. You'll have, it will only mean that the Hindi belt will have an upper hand, considering Hindi would be their first language. So this is a debate that is never ending. In fact, several southern states have resisted so long, which is why Hindi is made optional in schools. If you notice, it's not compulsion. Hindi is an optional subject in schools across of South India because of this kind of resistance. Even the northeast schools have, some of the northeastern schools though have made Hindi third language as compulsory. Some South Indian schools also have made Hindi third language compulsory, but it's largely optional, only because of the kind of resistance that people have met Hindi imposition with. All right, now a quick word, as we know that the debate has gone on, finally Kichcha, Sudeep and Ajay Devgn have sort of settled this matter. And by the way, we hear that Sudeep and Ajay Devgn have also spoken on the phone. They've had a good chat over this, and this whole controversy is now doused. Sudeep also expresses his wish to work with Kajol in the near future. He hopes so. So this is all good, but and obviously there's great camaraderie shared by stars altogether and across different industries. But when it comes to language, people are very sentimental about their local language, their mother tongue. And no, Hindi is not everyone's mother tongue. All right. So a quick word finally on Uttar Pradesh. We're looking at UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has now pulled down almost 10,000 or close to 11,000, 10,923 loudspeakers from religious places across Uttar Pradesh. Now, obviously, largely we're looking at mosques where loudspeakers have been pulled down, but the district administrations have said that we have not looked at mosques or temples or any religious places. We've worked without discrimination. All loudspeakers across areas wherever it was really loud has been pulled down. So so the volumes of about 35,000 other loudspeakers have been brought down to permissible decibel levels. So this is a statewide drive which the UP government has undertaken to remove unauthorized loudspeakers from religious places and set the volume levels to permissible limits at places where it was allowed. So Uttar Pradesh government obviously has, critics have obviously accused Uttar Pradesh government of trying to target minorities, especially the mosques, the Muslims during Ramzan, etc. But here Uttar Pradesh says that they're just only merely working without discrimination, only so that it's not inconvenience to people at large. So this is what we see. While on one hand that's happening in Uttar Pradesh, we're seeing tensions brewing in Maharashtra. While you have in Maharashtra Raj Thakre's party and the cousin of Uddhav Thakre pushing for loudspeakers to be banned, and says if it's not banned, then allow us also to chant Hanuman Chalisa on loudspeakers, which is a valid point that they're making. If a rule is, if a rule or if a permission is given for one religion, then all religions should have the same right. What is the permissible levels, decibel levels according to the Supreme Court? So Maharashtra government is saying, let's not divide the community based on this and create animosity between groups and religious communities. Let's try and understand what is the permissible levels of loudspeakers, and then come to a collective decision instead of making this debate and making a road tamasha and sitting out on the streets and chanting religious slogans. Let's not divide and disturb communal harmony. That's that. Thank you very much for watching.